Coming to you live from Radio Cayman Studio.
For the record.
For the record. Hear from your government officials, independents, and the opposition on issues that matter to you. The record. Engage in an open dialogue between residents and lawmakers.
For the record.
The record. Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record. And now, your host, Orit Connor.
Good morning and welcome to the program. Whether you're here in the Cayman Islands or if you're listening to us via the web overseas. I'm your host, Orit Connor, also known as OC. You're listening to For the Record, which is your show on your radio station, 89.9 FM. For the Record is about giving you the latest and most current information on issues that will affect you, will affect your families, that will affect your pocketbooks. We know that all of you are interested in hearing what is happening in the Cayman Islands, and in particular, like I said, those things that will affect you. For the Record is heard every morning on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 7:30 until 9 o'clock in the morning. We have no guests in our studio this morning, so we will have open line, and we will welcome you to call in to discuss any issues that may be affecting you. Today is June 27, 2014. For many children, it's the last day of school. So you parents, this is the last day of having to rush off to school, so you'll have hopefully more time to listen to our show in the morning and also to participate. Now, one of the things that I'm sure will be on your mind from now until August, September, when school starts again, will be, what do I do with the kids? If you're fortunate enough to have helpers, nannies, then that's fine. But for those of you who don't, I am sure that it will present a substantial challenge to you as to what to do with your children during the course of the summer. We are endeavoring on For the Record to get information to you about the various programs that are available for kids during the summer, whether they be football camps, whether they be basketball camps. I have seen information on some of them, and in some cases it will be fairly expensive for a week or two for kids. And I know that many of you are facing financial challenges at this point in time also, so to have to fork out $100, $150 per week for a summer camp is going to be fairly expensive. Then there are those of you who are pretty well to do off financially, and you're able to either send your kids to summer camp here, or even to send your kids overseas to relatives or to camps overseas. I'm told that in some instances, for instance, that it may be cheaper to send children overseas to camps than it is in the Cayman Islands. I find that to be alarming, but if indeed that is the case, it is something that you want to look at after. For those of you who know about summer camps in the Cayman Islands, please feel free to call in and to share that information with our listening audience, because every little bit helps, and sometimes the moral road or word of mouth can help someone who is unaware of what is happening. And then, of course, for those of you who are looking forward to the new school year, we're also gathering information in relation to those of you who are challenged in terms of being able to have funds for school lunches or breakfast for your children, and we know the ramifications of children going to school on empty stomachs. We're wanting to get information for you on that as well. And you have heard me in the past speak about Feed Our Future Cayman, and I have given several of you on the phone and by text messaging or email, I have given you information in relation to Feed Our Future Cayman and how to get in contact with them, how to fill out information online or offline for those of you who don't have a computer. Also, how do you get in contact with your principals in the schools who do know about this? And this is a partnership between Feed Our Future Cayman, the Department of Children and Family Services, as well as the school. So if you're involved with Feed Our Future Cayman, please feel free to call in. Give us any relevant information on that. Remember, as I said earlier, this is your radio station. This is your program. Don't feel shy about calling in and telling us the good things about the good things that are happening in Cayman. You hear people call in all of the time and talk about the negative stuff, and we welcome them too, because we want everyone to express their feelings to us. But we want to hear the good as well as the bad, and there is more good out there than there is bad and negative things. In the past few shows, Monday and Wednesday, on Monday we talked to Education Minister Honorable Tara Rivers and her support staff, and they talked about the employment situation. We talked about gender affairs. We see an article in the Caymanian Compass today, actually not an article, but an editorial which talks about Cayman schools and the need to raise our standards. We have seen reports in the new articles in the paper about reports that were commissioned by the Education Department and that have been shelved. We have talked about that. We see now where the Cayman News Service made a Freedom of Information request to the Ministry of Education. That request was answered directly by the Chief Officer in the Ministry of Education, and the request was basically denied, and the reasons given for that. I want to discuss those reasons given to see whether or not it is something that I or that you would agree with, because what is important here really is the public interest. But I'd like to take the last paragraph of the Compass editorial, and I quote, "If we wish to transform public education in Cayman, we need to raise our standards as parents, elected members, educators, and students. History will judge us harshly if we do not bequeath to our children schools that will equip them with the knowledge they need to lead rich and fulfilling lives." I have said repeatedly, and I strongly believe that we here in the Cayman Islands have a golden opportunity to find enormous success in educating our children. We are a small jurisdiction. We have a population of between 55 and 60,000, closer to 55,000 in our 3 islands. There is no reason why we cannot shape education to suit the collective needs of the Cayman Islands, and not only the collective needs of the Cayman Islands, but also to be able to export some of our talent to other places as well. We have an enormous opportunity to do that. We won't be able to do that, of course, if we find that civil servants, government officials, withhold relevant information important, crucial information, if they withhold that from us, for instance, if there is a report that speaks to savings that can be achieved in the sister island of Cayman Brac by merging two primary schools, and if there's a report that makes a recommendation for that to happen, there is no reason why those recommendations should not be discussed in the public domain. Ultimately, I would say that the final decision as to what happens in Cayman Brac should be left to the people of the Brac. But I say that with this proviso, that if it means that there are considerable expenses to be incurred by the Cayman Islands government by doing that, and if we can make savings, because we already see that it is an enormous challenge and an enormous task for us to keep Cayman Brac and Little Cayman as vibrant and attractive communities. So it's already costing us to do that. If there are cost savings out there, then at least it should be discussed in the public domain. The other reservation that I have in relation to the Freedom of Information request, and the reason given that it is a paper that was prepared for cabinet and it has not gone to cabinet yet, so therefore it cannot be released. My question would be, which administration and which cabinet was that prepared for? If it was commissioned by another administration, then my view is that that document basically remains a document that is no longer relevant to the, obviously no longer relevant to the previous administration, because that administration is no longer in place. And unless this current administration has an interest in that particular subject and wants the same information, then yes, that cabinet paper and that information is relevant. But if it is just sitting there because it was commissioned by another administration, then I see no reason why the justification given by the Ministry of Education and the Chief Officer for not releasing that document, I do not see where that holds water at all. And I hope that Cayman News Service will continue its appeal to the Information Commissioner on this to ensure that it is released. What is important is that the public needs to know we cannot continue as civil servants to, or you cannot continue as civil servants to hide or to hold back information that is important, so important to the public that will enable them to make decisions and enable them to discuss it. What also goes along with that particular incident also is that it appears as if some parents in some capacity or the other had access to that report as well. So there are some people who know about the report and its contents, and there are others who do not know. But overall, like I said earlier, we have to take education in the Cayman Islands seriously. We have to ensure that we get the best for our children as far as education is concerned. I heard a discussion a few days ago in relation to a comparison between private schools and public schools, and people who have said that private schools, in the private schools, teachers are paid better than in the public schools, and I believe that statement is erroneous. I believe the salary in public schools are much higher, and we see people transitioning from private schools to public schools. Then the question also is the quality of education in private schools and public schools. And that's up for debate as well. There are some of you who will say the quality of education is better in private schools than there are in public schools. There are others who may disagree on that subject. But if you have a view on it, please feel free to call and let us have your views on that. Of course, our toll-free number for you to call is 1-800-534-8255, or you can also call us on 949-8037 or on 949-6990. I'm your host, Dorit Connor. You're listening to For the Record. We're going to have open lines this morning as we have no guests in our studio. We're going to go to a commercial break, and when we come back, hopefully we'll hear from you, the public, that you will call in to your radio station and to your program, For the Record. Good morning and welcome back to the program. I'm your host, Dorit Connor. You're listening to For the Record. We have no guests in our studio this morning, so we're having open line, and I'm told that there's one caller on the line. Caller, good morning and welcome to For the Record.
Happy Friday. Good morning, Mr. Connor. How are you today?
Good morning, Mr. Brown. I'm fine. How are you?
Doing very well, thank you. Now, as it relates to education and schooling, I think it's very important when parents plan family planning to have children. I mean, it's unfortunate when we have children born in situations where they're not planned, but that's not a failure because it doesn't matter whether you were planned or not planned. What's important is you get the right structures in place so that you become a success, a partnership between parents, teachers, to push that young person. But why it's important for family planning, a man, woman gets married, they start a family, and when the time is right, children come along, is it's a major investment when you invest in a child. And those who become successful, in my opinion, those who are privileged to go to elitist schools, private schools, whether it's a Christian school or a non-Christian school, but private in the sense that only the elite are allowed to go there because the prices are set that only the privileged can attend. So a child, a student goes to a private school for his or her entire life, from elementary through secondary. And when it's time for the tertiary level, they're sent to Yale, Princeton, Harvard, Oxford, Cambridge. Whether or not they're making good grades or not, because mom and dad has the money and they're able to push them through these expensive schools. And if it's a case where their ancestors also followed suit, or rather their ancestors also went through these elitist schools, it's continued to be passed down. My point is, these are the students, once they become adults and they graduate from these elitist schools, these are the ones that will get the top jobs in the country. These are the ones who will be landing jobs at Walker's, at Maples and Calder, at Deloitte and Touche. You see where I'm going with this? Not to knock the government school system, because I know many bright students who pass through the public school or the government school system.
Exactly. There have been, many prominent Caymanians who have gone through the local school system as well. Yes, you're correct.
Yes, sir. But I'll just close again by saying my point is those who are privileged enough to go to these elitist schools, their future is set almost. And you find that many of those who've joined us, the white-collar expatriate who works in this country as lawyers and accountants, making good money in this country, they're the ones who are able to send their children to these expensive private schools. And they're the ones who will get the first opportunity at these law firms and accountant firms. The poor little child coming from Dog City or the Congo or up in the East, they got to work even harder. But if they work hard, they too can succeed. Keep up the good work, Mr. Connor. I'm all for education because it's what is going to take this country in the future. An educated populace Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments, Mr. Brown. And yes, I agree that those who have the opportunity to send their children to elite schools, Ivy League schools, Cambridge, Oxford, the opportunity for them to come back and to take jobs in the private sector, top jobs there. What you also find with some of the children of those very financially well-to-do parents is that they go off and they take some eccentric, elaborate courses that have nothing to do whatsoever with the business world, to the chagrin of their parents, who say, I've spent all of this money to send them to school, and look at what they want to be. They want to get into art. They wanted to get into sculpture and stuff like that. Yeah. So some of them do that. But what is important for us here in the Cayman Islands is for those persons who have attended Georgetown Primary School, Red Bay Primary School, John Gray High School, Clifton Hunter High School, give them the opportunity. Not necessarily, they may not be able to go to elite Ivy League schools, but open the doors for them to get the education that they want. Then we get them back home. We take them and we nurture them. We put them into jobs that we feel, that they feel comfortable in, that they want to be in. Because one of the challenges that we're having in Cayman now in relation to education is that you get a government scholarship. You have an obligation to pay that monies back to the government. But many times there is no commitment by the government to place you in a position when you get back. You have to go out there into the jungle, into the employment jungle, and fend for yourself. Now, yes, I know that there are those who argue that there has to be transparency and there has to be equal opportunity for everyone. So if there's a job available, you have to ensure that it is advertised and everyone has an opportunity, to get that job. And that is one of the reasons also why the Caymanization of the civil service has not taken place, and where we have not necessarily made room for people to move up the ladder. What do they call it again? Succession planning. Succession planning has not succeeded in the Cayman Islands, in particular in government, because of all of these other shackles that we placed on our hands to be able to do that. And our excuses is we have to make it available to everyone. We have to start to make inroads for our own people, for those who find themselves to be in less fortunate circumstances than others. We have to give them a push. So what am I saying is we need some form of affirmative action for some Caymanians. Not necessarily all of them, and we'll get some Caymanians who have come from the bottom up and moved up, and they will think like a Clarence Thomas in the U.S. Supreme Court, who opposes affirmative action in the United States because he had to go through the rough situation, work himself through college and stuff like that. Not everyone has the ability to do that, and there are some of us who need to be nurtured more than others. You look, if you have a litter, and I apologize for making this analogy, but you may have a litter of pups. Some may come out to be real sprucey and lively, and there are others that need nurturing. We have to recognize that, and we have to do that. We're almost up to news time, about 1 minute before 8 o'clock. Susan, is the news ready, or should I continue to talk in the meantime? You're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Orrit Connor. We have no guests in the studio this morning. We can be contacted on 1-800-534-8255. It's a toll toll-free number, or we can also be reached on 949-8037, also 949-6990. Please feel free to call. Stay tuned to the dial. We're going to talk about a multitude of topics because if I'm going to do all of the talking this morning, I can't just stay on one subject. So I'm going to be moving from one to the other. Stay tuned to the dial. We'll be back after the news. Morning and welcome back to For the Record. I'm your host, Orrit Connor. We have our open line today as we have no guests in the studio. We can be reached on a toll-free number, 1-800-534-8255 or 949-8037. You can also email us on fortherecord@candw.ky. I want to give a special shout out to the guys who I know are listening to the radio over on at the Scouts headquarters that is being constructed. They listen religiously every morning to the show, so I want to give a big shout out to you guys over there, and thanks for doing a great job on our Scouts headquarters. And hopefully in the next few months, the Scouts as well as the Girls Brigade and the Girls Guide will be able to occupy it and have a permanent home for themselves. So guys, keep up the good work and continue to listen to the show. Folks, earlier I spoke about a report, about cost saving that was buried in the Ministry of Education. And just for your information and for those of you who have not yet read the article on Cayman News Service, which was posted yesterday, the 26th of June, at about 6 o'clock, almost 6 o'clock in the evening, I will read the first paragraph of that article. It says that Cayman News Service has appealed the decision by the Education Ministry refusing a Freedom of Information request to release a 2011 report demonstrating how a substantial amount of money could be saved annually by amalgamating the two primary schools in Cayman Brac. That means combining the two primary schools in Cayman Brac. Publication of the report and a related PowerPoint presentation, which was shown to a select group of parents in March of this year, was blocked by Chief Officer Mary Rodriguez, who bypassed the ministry's FY manager and responded directly to the request, refusing on the grounds that the 3-year-old document contained proposals that have not yet gone to cabinet for consideration. And I will address some of those points point by point soon. It is not clear when the PowerPoint presentation was made and for whom, but CNS understands that in March 2014 it was shown at a meeting of government officials, including Deputy Premier and District MLA Moses Kakarnel, Sister Islands member for the Education Council, and 6 parents of Brac children who were at the time the presidents and vice presidents of 3 Brac PTAs. One of the parents who was at the meeting told CNS it was decided that it would not be feasible as it would put too much financial burden on the people of the islands having to drive to do 2 different sites. And that seems to be a fairly reasonable point. Let me just comment on 2 points. The chief officer bypassed the ministry's FOI manager and responded directly to the request, refusing it. That is allowed under the Freedom of Information law, so there was nothing wrong with the chief officer responding directly as opposed to going through the Freedom of Information manager. I can't tell you the reasons for doing that, why that would be done. If I were a chief officer in my capacity, I would probably do that if I am fearful that the information manager may make a decision other than the one that I would make. And of course, the information manager does not necessarily have to consult with the chief officer in making that decision, because the chief officer is one of the tiers of the appeals process that can be gone through after the information manager makes that decision. So I'm saying that personally, if I were the chief officer and I wanted to ensure that what I wanted done was done, then I would do it myself as opposed to having the FOI manager do it. The other part was on the grounds that the 3-year-old document contained proposals that have not yet gone to cabinet for consideration. So if it's 3 years ago, we know then it was in 2011 that the report was either commissioned or completed. Like I said earlier, that report would have been for the cabinet at that point in time. We have a new government, a new administration. So that report, unless this new administration requests that that report be revived and that it be brought to them, then I don't see where it is a valid reason to claim that because it hasn't gone to cabinet for consideration that it can't be released, because the cabinet that would have considered it is no longer there. It is a new cabinet under the Progressives and a coalition government. So that reason I don't see as well. I'm saying all of these things to remind you that while Radio Cayman is government owned, this show, as we said when we first launched, we are here to give you information. We're here to present, to allow the government to present their views and their programs, talk about their successes. We want them also to talk about their failures because we want to know about those as well. We also have a platform for the independent members, Mr. McLean and Mr. Miller, and we have a platform for the opposition, leader of the opposition and his colleagues, Mr. Bernard Bush, Captain Eugene, and we also want to have councillors on. We want to have those persons who in government who are charged with implementing the policies that are set by the cabinet and the government of the Cayman Islands, but we also want to hold them responsible. And when we see instances where not in the public interest, information is being withheld, information that people need to know about so that they can make a determination as to whether or not it is good or bad for them. We have to stop hiding behind the veil of denying requests, denying public documents that have been commissioned, documents that have been paid for by the people of the Cayman Islands. Your tax dollars, if you want to call it that, when you pay your duties at the airport when you come in, when you pay your stamp duty for the purchase of land, when you pay your fees for your trade and business licenses and your work permits, that's your money that is being spent. You have a right to know about what's happening and what's being published. We talk about wanting to be transparent, then we should be transparent. It should not be just merely in words, but we should be transparent in our deeds as well. In this particular situation, I don't see where revealing that report would be any hurt to the government of the Cayman Islands. What possibly may be the fear in terms of this report being published is what sort of division that it may cause and problems that it may cause between people in Cayman Brac and in Grand Cayman. If people in Grand Cayman say, oh, we're spending money to support the Brac, but here we can make some sense, and we're unable to do that because they won't join the two schools together. I also pointed out to you that one of the parents said that it was decided that it would not be feasible as it would put too much financial burden on the people of the islands having to drive to two different sites. Well, let us see the report and let us argue that point and see whether or not that is a valid point. Maybe we need to have more school buses in the islands, in Cayman Brac. Maybe we need to have more school buses in Cayman Brac to transport people. And the island is only, like Susan said, 12 miles long. And she should know it because she probably walked from one end to the other when she was a kid. So the island is only 12 miles long. But it is something that should be taken into consideration. Yes, Brackers, we know that you feel very independent and you feel that you should be making decisions for yourselves, and I support you on that there are certain things that you should need to be able to make the decisions for yourself, but there are others that we at least need to discuss. And a healthy discussion on a subject at the end of the day won't do any harm to anyone. We can discuss it, and at the end of the day we can still be friends once it has been discussed. But it is something that should be discussed. So I hope that Cayman News Service will be successful in its request. We don't have we're still looking towards whistleblower legislation, but I hope someone finds a windshield with a wiper on it so that the wind doesn't blow it off, and take that report and put it on the windshield of somebody's car so that we can have it. We need to see that report. I'm not encouraging anyone to do anything illegal, but at the same time, I hope that the Information Commissioner's decision on this will allow that information to be released. We have to stop having these reports done, and because we don't like what's in the report, we don't allow people to see it. And I would also encourage, if the Education Ministry feels strongly about the fact that it needs to go to Cabinet first, then maybe the current Education Minister should ask for it to go to Cabinet. So let Cabinet see it, and then we hope that the other reason that would be given after that probably would be given was that we don't want to inhibit the free flow of information and advice to be given to ministers, and by revealing the document and the author of that document and everything else, that those persons may feel reluctant in the future to give that information, in general to Cabinet. Well, if you're a consultant and you've been hired to do a report, then you do it and you give it in. That's what you're being paid for. If you're a civil servant, that's what you're there for, to give advice. And if you give bad advice, then people need to know about it. If you give good advice, then people need to know about it too. But don't tell me that as a civil servant, I may be inhibited from giving advice to the minister or to Cabinet if you make a document public. You're a civil servant. That's what you're there to do. That's a part of your job. And people, don't get me wrong, I was a former civil servant myself, so I'm not knocking them or anything else, but I'm just saying that you, the people, have the right to know. You, the people whose money is being spent, you have the right to know. You should be able to see these documents. You should be able, the media should be able to put them out there. We should be able to have open and frank discussions about them. And in some ways, that may help the government to make a decision. Here in Cayman, we only rely on polls when it comes to election time, as to who would you vote for or who wouldn't you vote for. But maybe public opinion will help the government to go one direction or the other. I'm going to switch gears for a minute and go to the Dilbert Marina and say that we haven't heard much in the last few days about the Dilbert Marina and the discussions, and I hope that the discussions are taking place in private rather than in the public domain, and at the end of the day that we will see some resolution to that issue as well. Folks, you're listening to For the Record, and in the event you don't recognize my voice, I am Orit Connor, also known as OC. I'm your host. We have no guests in the studio today. We are taking your calls. If you want to, feel free to call. The number is toll-free number 1-800-534-8255, or you can also call us on 949-8037. I think we're going to be taking a commercial break at this time. Stay tuned to 89.9 FM Radio Cayman and listen to For the Record. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. I'm your host, Orit Connor. We have no guests in our studios this morning, so we have open line, and I have to keep talking unless I get a call from you to discuss some of the issues that I have raised, or if you have an issue of your own or an observation, a good point, something positive that is happening in the community, something positive that has happened in your life, give us a call on 1-800-534-8255 or on 949-8037. If you have any thoughts about the show, what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? I keep getting positive feedback from you when I see you out there on the streets. I think we're giving you a good alternative to radio talk show to be able to listen in. We have segmented it in such a way that you hear from the government, that you hear from the opposition, two types of opposition, the independent opposition and the leader of the opposition, the official opposition. Although sometimes, depending on what the issue is, those two sets of opposition will get together and form a bigger opposition, and we've seen that happening. That's a good thing about politics too, that at the end of the day you may differ on some issues, but then you can put your head together and get together on other issues as well. And I know that those in the opposition collaborate at times, and sometimes even those government backbenchers may collaborate with the opposition as well. But folks, there's another paragraph in this article, CNS article, in relation to the cost-saving measure that I want to talk about. And you might have heard me go through my spiel there just now in relation to the civil servants. And I quote the article here: the chief officer also found that disclosure of the documents might inhibit the free and frank exchange of views for the purpose of deliberation. She claimed that civil servants, and I'm quoting again, she claimed that civil servants must be able to share all possible options and provide advice and recommendations freely and frankly to be considered by senior management and by policymakers in order to ensure decision-making process are robust. We know who the civil servants are anyway. We know who. When I was cabinet secretary, everybody knew who I was. We know who the cabinet secretary is now. We know who the chief officer in every ministry is. We know who the deputy chief officers in every ministry is. So that's not a problem. But as a civil servant, I am charged with giving advice. That's what I'm being paid for. But I shouldn't hide behind a veil once I have given that information. Not only that, though, that if the name of a particular person is there, and if you want to redact that name, if you want to remove that name, cross it out, blank it out, that can be done if it does not change the substance of the report. So that can be done as well. Again, I don't really see that as a good reason or a good excuse. And that may be a point that Cayman News Service can use in their appeal to the Information Commissioner if they have not already done that. But they certainly, could do that as well. My opinions on the London office, and I have received some feedback from people. We have been advised that there has been a short list for the post of the director for the London office. The government has not revealed the names of those persons who have been shortlisted, but there are people who have pointed out that it is extremely important for a Caymanian to head up the office in the UK. Yes, we do need consultants sometimes to open doors for us in the UK, because it's extremely important that the people that you're going to be talking with, that somebody knows, their culture, their characteristics, so that you know how to deal with them. So we certainly need someone. And in the past, we had a company called DLA, who was a consultant there. They didn't necessarily have offices in the London office, so we had access to that advice, and those people had access to people that we needed to get to. So there's nothing wrong with having a consultant, but we need to have a Caymanian face in the London office, because that is a Caymanian office. It's almost like a consulate. So you don't have a consulate and then you have someone who is not of your nationality heading it up. So we need to have a Caymanian there. I'm told that we have a caller on the line, and since I've been asking for your calls to come in, I don't want to neglect them at all. Caller, good morning, and welcome to For the Record, and thanks for calling in.
Morning, Mr. Carter. It's number one from the block.
Morning, number one. How are you?
Oh, I listened to you from time you started.
Oh, great.
You don't worry about that. I don't miss that.
Thank you.
I just called to say two things. First of all, what you're talking about having someone up in London being a Caymanian, I agree with that 100%. Because they will know what's happening here, but they got to make sure they pick the right person.
Yep, that's correct. I remember after Hurricane Ivan, I was cabinet secretary at the time, and I was also put in charge of the recovery. And every morning about 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, I was on the phone with Jennifer Dilbert, and we were communicating with each other. What is it can we do up here for you? What is it that you need? Medicines or whatever? What can I request? And she worked diligently, on that. So there is no question that a Caymanian is capable of doing that job. It's just a question of which Caymanian. And sometimes I've heard this terminology before, like crabs in a bucket, crawling to get over each other. But it's important for us to have the right person in that job, but it mustn't be Caymanian. I agree with that, number one.
Yes, sir. And the other thing I want to say is this. Everything Cayman Island government does, they got to report to England. This one coming here, paper going there. Why it is they can't release this whole tempura thing and get the Cayman Island government back the money that they wasted?
The tempura question, that issue is really a hard one while it is still going through the courts. But I think the Cayman Islands deserve to know what that money was spent on. And if it were the UK, if it was happening in the UK, the public and parliamentarians there would demand that they know what has happened. We see, for instance, with the expense, and you can't really compare the two, but the expense fiasco that they had in the UK, where members of parliament were running up expenses and charging for various things that were illegal. Some went to jail for it. Some lost their seats as a result of it. So they make sure that people are accountable and they get the information out. I see no reason why it shouldn't be done here. We talk about the turtle farm losing money. We talk about money being stolen from allegedly from the UCCI. We need to talk about tempura eventually, and we need to know how much was spent, where it was spent. Remember, we saw the Daily Mail articles and photographs of some of those investigators lounging by pools and stuff like that, and at Sunset House and stuff like that. We need to know where that money was spent.
You don't need to know it. You know it was. It was spent on luxury.
Yep, and we need to know how much.
That's my feeling, not yours. You didn't say it, I did. And one last thing I want to say to you, because I got hold of the show. I want to warn the people of Windsor Park. Look out how your children walk the street and pick up things, because I hear nowadays that a lot of dogs are dying there by eating things that people throw around the place. Poison.
Yeah, that is cruel to poison animals. You know, some people get frustrated with having animals around, especially if the animals are loose. So, you know, you want to encourage people that they should keep their animals in their yard and keep them under control. But at the same time, that is cruel. It's inhumane, and I believe that there are laws against doing that as well.
Well, I know a friend of mine. He had a dog. That man I used to call in the first class. And since I come up last week, I understand that somehow he got poisoned and things. Somebody must have thrown something, or when he carried him walking or something, the dog died, man. The police need to look into these things and lock up everyone and not doing it. Okay, sir?
Okay, thanks very much, number one, for the call. Thanks for calling in, and have a great weekend. Speaking of Windsor Park, I don't have the name of the street with me now, but I was contacted by a resident in Windsor Park in relation to two sort of containers, but they're not containers. They're more like classrooms that are sitting on a piece of property supposedly owned by government. And their concern is that we're in hurricane season, and if there is a hurricane, and if we get storm surge or we get high winds, that those containers there are dangerous objects that could do damage, or even cause death. If anyone is listening from government, anyone is listening from the Lands and Survey Department, if that piece of property belongs to government, and if it isn't government's the containers aren't for government that are on there, then some action need to be taken about it. I'm trying to get more information in relation to it because the people, residents in this portion of Windsor Park, have some concerns about it. I forget the name of the street, but I will be passing that information on to the Lands and Survey Department and to the government, other relevant agencies to look into it. Folks, you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Dorit Connor. We have no guests in the studio this morning, so I'm doing all of the talking, but at the same time, inviting you to call us on our toll-free number, 1-800-534-8255, or you can also call us on 949-8037. Just to remind you, on Monday morning on our show, the government scheduled to be on, and we have scheduled Minister Osborne Bawden. So I'm sure that we will be talking about several issues there as well that are extremely crucial and important to you. Susan, are we going to a commercial break at this point in time? Yes, we are. It's 8:45. Stay tuned to For the Record on Radio Cayman 89.9. We'll be back for another 15 minutes of talk and wrap up. So stand by. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. I'm your host, Dorit Connor. No guests in the studio this morning, so we're talking about anything and everything. Wide open for you to call in and talk to us. The toll-free number is 1-800-534-8255 or 949-8037. And you can also email us on For the Record, one word, For the Record, at candw.ky. Like I said, we're talking about anything because it's open line today for us. Someone has emailed me in relation to the possible appearance of a double standard in Cayman when it comes to the sentencing of visitors who are found entering the islands by way of the airport with ammunition in their possession, in their luggage. And they have equated that to locals who are found with ammunition, and the disparity, the difference in the sentencing between those who come in at the airport and say, well, I'm a licensed gun owner in the U.S. I simply forgot it in my luggage, and I think the last incidents of that, the person was fined $3,000 for it. Someone who is found locally, and I'm unable at this point in time to give you a specific reference to someone, but I've seen stories of it, and you would have seen them as well, where people have received harsh sentences, as a result of that. Now, part of the debate on that is how is it that these people, with the strict and stringent controls supposedly that they have in the U.S. as far as the TSA is concerned and the scanning of luggage. I know when I travel, for instance, and I carry my bike in a bike case, I can guarantee you, and it's locked, but it has one of those TSA locks in it. I can guarantee you when I get to my destination, I open it, I'll see that slip of paper in there that says that the TSA has opened my bike box, and they have looked in there, and they have seen, they have looked in and examined it. So how is it that these people are allowed to get through the security checks? I think in this case, it was something like, was it 30 or 50 rounds of ammunition that the person had? That's a lot to miss. And the other issue is, because we're a tourist destination, some may speculate that that's the reason why we don't impose these harsh sentences on people. But I also read an article in Bermuda, and there's a lawyer in Florida who has been slamming and criticizing Bermuda and saying that they're trying to make money off of drug convictions, because they go aboard cruise ships with their sniffer dogs and stuff, and when they find drugs on board, small quantities that are supposedly being used, being there for personal use, that they take them to court, fine them, but they're doing it basically for the purposes of money. So yes, we have to be sensitive about our tourist industry, but we can't have a double standard and for two sets of people. And what if it's a Caymanian who's coming from overseas with it in their luggage? Do we treat them the same way? Maybe a Caymanian who's residing overseas and come with it. Are we going to treat them the same way? So that person has registered their concern about that. What should we do about it? Should the Cayman Islands government take proactive steps to warn people that they should check their luggage, because we have strict laws in relation to ammunition and firearms in the Cayman Islands, unlike the U.S., where their Second Amendment right gives them the right to bear arms. It doesn't apply here in the Cayman Islands. So do we take a proactive approach and let people know that that does not happen in the Cayman Islands? We see when we were entering the U.S., for instance, the big signs up there: if you have any agricultural products, any food, any meats, this is your last opportunity to dump it in the bin before you get to customs. Maybe we need to do that so that we see less and less of that, because I think so far this year in the Cayman Islands we have had 2 instances of it. So we need to get that cleared up, and the question is, do we have double standards for both in terms of the sentencing and everything else? Yes, if you go with a good story, especially if you have a good lawyer, and you go with your story to the courts can be sympathetic towards you. And I have no doubt that in these cases that the persons had genuine reasons for leaving them in their luggage, but at the same time, for some reason, they were able to slip through the cracks, and those cracks must be pretty big if you get 50 rounds of ammunition being able to get through them. Those cracks must be pretty big. So the TSA has its reputation to defend as well in this particular instance. So we need to look at that. Folks, you listen to For the Record. I'm your host, Orrit Connor. We have about 6 more minutes to go before we wrap up. We still have a few minutes to take a call if someone wants to call in. The number is 1-800-534-8255 or 949-8037. For you civil servants, if you think that I was giving you a hard knock this morning, don't take it personally. Don't take it personal at all. When you get criticism, what you got to do, you have to not take it personally, listen to it, and act on it. So it's important because I'm a former civil servant, so I'm one of your brethren, one of your colleagues. So I know what you go through. I've been faced with having to make decisions in relation to FOI requests myself. But I make no apologies for what I have said in relation to it. You are civil servants. You are charged with particular responsibilities. Your responsibilities also extend to the people of the Cayman Islands. And when it is something that has a public interest, and when we talk about public interest, it's not because the public is interested in knowing. It is because the public has a right to know because it is in their interest. So that's what the public interest is all about. So don't be afraid to release those documents. No one can chastise you or criticize you or punish you from an administrative standpoint if you release those documents and you have valid reasons for releasing them. And one of those is the public interest, and the public interest really should take priority over a lot of other interests, especially the interest of politicians who want to ensure that their record remains unblemished, and that it positions them for the next time that election comes around, that no one can use it on a platform against them. We want to ensure that the public is given the information so that they can make decisions on their own. 1-800-534-8255. Lost my train of thought there. Also 949-8037. We only have about 4 minutes to go. I want to thank you all for listening to the show. We know that we get more listeners than callers. We know that you're interested in what's happening in the Cayman Islands. We know you care about what's happening in the Cayman Islands. Like I said, next week we're going to have on Monday government. We have scheduled Minister Osborne Borden, who has responsibility for several areas, including health and environment. We also going to have, like I said, Minister Osborne Borden, who has several responsibilities. We're going to get information in relation to you about the summer programs that are in place. If there are any free ones, we want to let you know about those if you don't already know. If there are those that you have to pay for, we want to let you know about those too. So those of you who fortunately have the ability to pay for those services can do so. Like I said, I know it's a challenge. Earlier I said it's a challenge for some people in relation to what do you do with your children during the summer, especially if you don't have a nanny, if you don't have a helper to assist you in taking care of those children. It can be extremely challenging. We hope that there are some summer jobs out there for some kids who will be able to take advantage of it, including those who are coming home from overseas school for the summer period, that they can make some money to take back with them to school as well. So we hope that there will be something available for them. We want to hear from the government about that as well. Tell us what's out there for the kids. I want to remind you to have a great weekend. Stay safe, not only today, but on Saturday and on Sunday and every day. Try to perform a random act of kindness to someone. We are our brothers and our sisters' keeper. There is in spite of the situation that you may find yourself in, there is always someone who is less fortunate than we are. And we ask you to think about them, hold out a helping hand to them. That will make you feel better, and you would have, at some point in time, assisted someone and did your part in making this place a better place for all of us. Again, it's 1 minute before 9, so I'm going to sign off now. Have a great weekend. Thanks for those who participated in calling in. I hope I didn't bore you too much going from subject to subject, but I always have to be prepared in the event that we have no guests in the studio. So again, thank you for listening in, guys over at the Scouts headquarters. Keep up the good work. I'm coming over there to check on you now to see what work has been done. We're extremely anxious to occupy our premises, and thanks for the great job that you're doing. Folks, have a great weekend. See you back here on Monday, God's willing.